Welcome to the sixth episode of our PG 258 podcast series, where we venture into the intriguing domain of international relations and organizations in the context of Papua New Guinea. Guiding you on this journey are your hosts, myself, Benedict Yura, and
JT Kekea.
As the facilitators of the PG 258 International Organizations in PNG unit within the Bachelor of Arts in PNG and International Studies program at Divine Right University, we've chosen to deliver all our lessons in the form of convenient podcast. In today's edition, we will deeply engage with the captivating topic of international organizations in PNG, and in particular, we will look at the United Nations. So we have with us our guest, Mr. Jeremy Tirang from the United Nations. So remember to grab your headphones as we set forth on this enlightening expedition together.
Jeremy, thank you for being here with us, for agreeing to do this with us. Can you just tell us briefly what you do for the United Nations in PNG?
Thank you, GT. So basically, my role, firstly, I work as a junior human rights assistant, and I work within the agency for the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, which is OHCHR. But currently, we don't have a field office in the country, and our unit is Human Rights Advisory Unit. So we're a unit within OHCHR. So we more or less provide an advisory role to the resident coordinator, which is the head of the UN. So the resident coordinator coordinates all UN activities within the country. So we are attached with the resident coordinator. Anything that is centered around human rights, provide the advisory role or the support to the resident coordinator. My role consists of providing support to the National Human Rights Officer and Human Rights Advisor. So that's basically my role. We work in the space of treaty reporting. We provide human rights training to Royal Constabulary and the CS, and sometimes to the Defense Force. But most of our work is around advisory, given that we operate on a limited budget. So that's basically for my area of work, I'd say.
Okay, thank you, Jeremy, for that. We'll move on to what's initially our first question is, how does the United Nations presence in Papua New Guinea contribute to strengthening regional cooperation and fostering peaceful relations among neighboring countries in the Pacific region?
The mandate for UN in general is we more or less support the government of the day or the government. And most of our programs or the things that the UN does in the country is more or less support the government. So its priority areas, take for example, the medium-term development plan or the plans that have been drawn up there. We more or less provide technical support, funding, and advice on that, or we provide support through those the plans themselves. So we usually the state comes up with the plans, and we usually the UN comes up with its a framework which is called the cooperation framework, which is a plan where the UN draw plans to support the plans that the government has. So we factored all the programs within those the plans that has been done by the government. So we were able to do this in the medium-term development tree. I think there was I think it ended this year, and from 2018 to 2022, I think we were able to come up with our cooperation framework, which is a partnership between the government. So we support them in those their priority areas. So I think recently this year they've drawn up the fourth medium-term development plan. So the UN is currently working towards having the cooperation framework with the government to support the work of government in the country. But like I've said earlier, in terms of supporting in providing peace in the region and supporting peaceful relationships among neighboring countries, we usually have offices within the Pacific itself, and those offices or those duty stations, we have a relationship with them. In my NGO, we usually have regional meetings with our office based in Fiji. So in that meetings, we usually share experiences or advice, or more or less just sharing ideas on our work and what the programs and what we have been doing in each state. So this more or less creates an avenue for us to learn from each other and see where all our challenges are and where we could better provide development assistance to the state itself and to the government. So I think in that area, we more or less create a space where we were able to learn from each other's challenges. And given that Pacific, where mostly there are some instances where we're similar in cases or in development challenges. So that's an area that we might or we would share experiences and learn from other field officers in implementing our work in that area.
Can you elaborate on the role of the United Nations in mediating and facilitating diplomatic efforts to address regional challenges or disputes that may impact Papua New Guinea's stability and development?
To my knowledge, I think the only issue or a regional challenge that is present within my tenure as working with the UN would be the dumping of the waste. Japanese a current issue right now, but I've never had UN coming out providing or more or less a statement coming out in supporting the call by other state leaders in the dumping of the waste into the Pacific Ocean. I think this week Jalta Wong has came out asking for an independent investigation into that dumping of this wastewater. So that's something that I've never had or heard from any UN resident coordinators within the country, within the Pacific itself. But in regards to the state, the country itself, I'm not sure if you guys heard of the National Development Policy that was drafted by the National Media Development Policy that was drafted by the ICT department. I think they did a couple of surveys around and all that. But my office we had a copy of the first draft, and there were concerns surrounding those area, in those wordings, in those use of languages in that policy itself, which was quite concerning for the UN itself or the country itself. So in that area, we were able to have a conversation with a department, with one of the secretaries regarding the issue surrounding that drafting of the media development policy. But I think, in my view, we were able to foster or talk to the government directly in regards to the issues surrounding the drafting of that policy itself and the issues that the impacts that it would have on the population itself. So upon UN's request and actions, I think after the first draft that came out, there was a information seminar that was done by the ICT department just to provide responses to the concerns and all that. So one of the areas that I feel like UN works very good at is we usually have a closer relationship with the government. So we were able to talk on issues that other organizations would not have a say in it, or would have not have the connections to speak directly to the state itself or the prime minister in that regard. So I think having this, I would not say a role, but as these connections, or more or less this influence to talk on regional issues, or more or less issues that are patent or that might impact the country, would also open up opportunities for other states in the region to go down that path in that area. I think we have a really good approach to speak with the state itself and hear our concerns, but more or less in a diplomatic manner, given that we're merely guests. At the end of the day, we're merely guests in the state, in the country itself, and our concerns must be heard and must be respected. And also we like to do it in a manner that is diplomatic in that sense.
In what ways does the United Nations leverage its partnerships with other international organizations to amplify its impact on Papua New Guinea's development and security concerns?
One of the partnerships that UN was able to foster is we have programs that are funded by those partnership. We have this the Highlands Project, which is a EU-funded project where it's been carried out in the Highlands region. We have the Strait Project that is currently running in around that East Pacific area. I think it's a project also funded by EU and other development partners. I'm not sure other development partners are, but these projects, we were able to get the funding from one of the biggest development partner. The other project that was funded by the EU too is under the Spotlight Initiative, the project which focused more around the South and violence against women, or GBV cases, or in that area of work. So I think those partnerships were able to give us the money to carry out the work in those priority areas that is of a need for the country itself. Again, we're just implementing partners, so we have experts in that area where we were able to provide on those projects. We were able to do the job. We were able to carry out those development projects. So I think these are the partnerships that are very important for us to carry our work, because most of our funding, we rely more on our other partners to provide funding to carry out our work. We have the European countries, other donors who have provided us funding to carry out work. So most of the work that UN does is we usually raise funds to carry out the work. So it's not, we rely on countries and other big development partners to provide us the funding to carry out work. So like at the end of the day, those partnerships are important for us, and they more or less help us in carry out the work in the country itself and support the government.
Could you provide insights into how the United Nations utilizes its platforms and initiatives in PNG to promote global norms such as human rights, environmental sustainability, and social equity?
Like I mentioned earlier regarding one of the work that my agency does is treaty reporting. I help support the government in the treaty reporting, given that when the state itself sign up to international treaties, they more or less have an obligation to report in how they implement those or more or less domesticate those treaties into the policies or the laws in the country. In doing so, we were able to have those international norms more or less factored into the laws of the country itself. Take, for instance, the UDHR, Universal Declaration of Human Rights. We have most of the rights that are on the UDHR are found within the Constitution. So this is one of the documents that more or less provides the foundation of the rights in the country itself. So in that area of space, we help domesticate those international norms or those treaties that we see that is important. We more or less provide the support in that area in helping state in regards in providing technical support in drafting of those policies, or making sure those policies and those laws that have been drafted are of international standards, or they comply to those international standards that the world has. So in that area, we help the state domesticate those international norms in their policies and their laws.
Given Papua New Guinea's strategic location and its potential influence on maritime trade and security, how does the United Nations engage with the country to enhance its role in regional and international maritime cooperation frameworks?
A very difficult question for me to answer, but I'll just give my answer to that question. In terms of PNG's strategic location and its potential influence on maritime trade and security, UN, I'd say, given its presence within the Pacific itself, we have a very big impact in itself. I think the first impact that I see that is very evident is the ocean policy. The foundation has been set by the law of the sea, where most states are party to. So this more or less provide a foundation for most of the policies surrounding that particular area in terms of maritime and security. And I feel that this international framework more or less support, or in a way support, the government to come up with policies, or states to come up with policies to address. There are a lot of UN agencies, but there are only a few that is present in the country right now. But it also depends on the invitation of the government itself and where they see as a priority area. So unless and until the state see itself as a priority area, UN can support them in that area.
So if you look at the Maritime Zones Act, it's more or less based on the UN Law of the Seas UNCLOS, and it outlines what we should do as a country and the foreign minister's role, what he will do if we are faced with different threats to our maritime security. So the National Oceans Policy is based on the MZA 2015. So is there any UN organizations working with the PNG government to look at our implementation of the UNCLOS in PNG, apart from human rights and sustainable development? To your knowledge?
To my knowledge, the only agency that I know of that work within that area of sustainability and conservation and environment is UNDP. UNDP have a couple of projects that they run in the space of sustainability and protection of protected areas, but these are mostly on, I think, in a smaller scale or particular area. But in terms of supporting the state itself in that maritime area, I'm not too sure about that. But I've seen I know that UNDP has done a couple of work in terms of climate change and RED, and supporting the government in policy and in more or less technical support to the government to provide assistance into policy drafting and legislations. So that's one area that I see UNDP supporting the government in that particular area. But in terms of maritime security,
thank you. Interesting answer.
So far, I've never come across any UN agencies working in that area, but that could be a research area for me to closely look at if there's any work that is done within that space.
Yeah, that's an area that we need to do further research. Like I said, the MZA is part of the UNCLOS, the domestication of the UNCLOS into our national domestic legal framework. And then the work of protecting our territorial sea and our EEZ has been distributed to various agencies as per the legislation. And then the National Oceans Policy was drafted by the Department of Justice and Attorney General in order to make sure that we take care of our ocean and minimize illegal activities happening in our maritime domain.
Sorry, the only agency that I believe would be working in that space would be UNODC, which is the Office of Drug Enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
but they more or less closely support the police. Most of their work is, they're a very small agency within the country to itself too. So I think they're made up of, I think only few employees around, but most of their work is around, I think, drug trade, and they support the police. So I think that's one of the implementing, one of the partners in terms of supporting the government.
So in general, what is your view about the role of international organizations in PNG?
I feel like I have a mixed view regarding that. I'll just take off my UN cap, and this is just my opinion. It doesn't, it's not the UN's opinion or my employee. I'd say there's a cool side of it, I guess. The other benefits of having international organizations is they more or less provide the funding, which is, given that we're a developing state and we drastically need funding in carrying out some of the work that the government don't see it as a priority or don't have the money to do so. In terms of the work that from the outset looking in, before joining UN, I only see UN as I don't see a lot of impact that UN has, but while working in that space, I see a lot of work that goes unnoticed by the public itself or by other people looking into UN, because most of the work that UN does is, its department. We provide support. One of the things that is of importance, I'd say, would be the capacity building. So we provide the technical advice, the support to the government into areas where we lack the expertise in that area. And I feel like UN provides that support in that area. But then again, it also comes to the question of letting other people fix our problems. There are a lot of misconception of how development should be done in this country. And I heard that from one of a development expert a while back when I had a conversation with him, and he mentioned something around letting Papua New Guineans fix their own problems. Like, again, it might be very hard for us, given that we don't know where to start, but I think we have, to our credit, I feel like we live and we understand our challenges, on a daily, we face those daily challenges on a day-to-day basis. And we are, I'll say, we're more or less expecting our own development challenges, and we know the root causes. I've heard of projects that has been run, but much of the money has been put in, but there's no tangible outputs to the project itself or programs itself. But again, this is an area where, I believe it can be better implemented if UN has the good support of the government itself. And again, like UN's mandate at the end of the day is to support the government. And I believe if we have this support, we are more or less support the government to our best of our ability. But at the end of the day, it's the state's responsibility. We more or less remind the state of their responsibility, I think, and UN provides that in a very diplomatic manner by saying that, this is an area of concern that we see that it's a priority to the state. We more or less support the government or provide that advice in that area in helping them implement or look into those developments in that space. And I guess my answer wouldn't be in support of, in a one-way support of the international organizations, but more or less, I think it's, I'll be sitting on the fence on this one. I feel like some of the things that, that there's an area of improvement, I'd say. Yeah, that's basically my answer regarding that. But in all, I feel like there's a lot of strides being made around supporting the government in those areas.
Could you share a bit about your transition from being a student of PNG Studies and International Relations, and then you completed the 4 years, you graduated, and then you moved into the real world, as we call it, and now you're working for a UN agency or organization, and like your experience and your journey so far. Share your experience briefly with us so our targeted audience can listen and be motivated by your experience.
Yeah, no, it's been a really good experience so far. I think one of the things that I found very important is the work of volunteerism. I think just volunteering your work and just having a hands-on approach in work. Because I remember in uni, I think most of the work are theory, I guess, but compared to other subject that I took in uni, I think most of the IR courses are very practical in a sense where it's most of the work that we do are case studies, and it also gives you perspective on where things are, or also perspective on real life scenarios. Worked in my particular area and in that space, like most of the things that comes across my desk are, I can easily like look at a particular subject area and just see where the connections that you were able to help us form, or that I would say that analytical thinking around issues. And I think the podcast that we did in, I think 10 years, we did a podcast on the research part of it into the area was really instrumental in me, like at least having an analytical eye into issues area and see where where those problems are and principles and all those theories surrounding in that area. But in regards to my experience, I'd say like after finishing uni, like it was after COVID too, so it's like I never actually had an opportunity to work somewhere, like, and it was a really good opportunity for me. But I think given that period, I applied to a few jobs, but so far like I haven't been able to get any job. And then I saw an advert about a volunteer role within a youth organization, so I was able to apply for it. To my surprise, they were able to recruit me and have them as one of the team members. So it started off back then. I was still looking for a job while doing something from the volunteer role itself, and I believe that volunteer role more or less provided me the view of how work life would be.
Okay, Jake, do you want to say something before we wind up?
No, I think we asked all the questions we wanted to ask, and Jeremy answered all of them really well, gave us a good insight on United Nations and its role within Papua New Guinea. Yeah, so very informative. So I have nothing else to add on to that.
Well, folks, that brings us to the end of this episode of the PG258 podcast series. We hope you have gained valuable insights into the work of the United Nations in PNG. Join us next time as we continue to explore the ever-evolving landscape of global affairs.
Wanna hear you go.